Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Insights with Expert series. This time I'm with Amber Swope from DITA Strategies. Amber specializes in management of information architecture and data and provides consultancy services on structured content, reuse, and models. Hi, Amber. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Take a minute. I'll get you to introduce yourself. Who are you and what do you do?
Well, obviously, my name is Amber Swope. I am an information architect, and I specialize in what I call management information architecture, not the delivery information architecture. And for me, the distinction is that I help organizations structure their managed source, their XML, as opposed to working on the UX end of things where folks work on the architecture around the delivery in a given platform, such as a research portal or an LMS or a knowledge center or anything like that. So I'm working with the original data source and the metadata that powers it.
Excellent, succinct. So our topic today is information architecture.
Yay.
I attended one of your I attended one of your talks, and a phrase that you mentioned, really stuck with me. And it's like, once you've implemented your information architecture, you're not done. Information architecture evolves. So let's talk about this a little bit. That's what this whole talk is going to be about. But the first question I'm going to ask you, and the obvious one, is what is information architecture?
And that's a great question. If you look this up online, you will get a plethora of different answers. The definition that I particularly like is information architecture is the art and science of organized information so that it's findable, manageable, and useful. And this definition is from Stiglitz. And I like it because, particularly in the work I do with helping folks with their data implementations, there's a science there. There is the open standard, the standard comes with very specific types of support. But if you have three different information architects work on the same challenge, we will all come up with valid solutions, but I can guarantee you that there will be some nuances that are different. And that's the art part of it. And it's the combination of the understanding of what works with the standard and then your experience as an architect trying to interpret the needs of the client to come up with the best solution for them. There really is very rarely a right or wrong solution.
Yeah, and users grow and companies grow.
Yep.
So, that's going to cause an evolution. You got to keep up with things. And so, how does information architecture evolve over time?
Well,
what are the reasons?
Yeah, most teams don't start with brand new content. Most teams that are moving into data have a large collection of content already. And when they do their initial implementation, I would hope, is some assessment of, what is coming over. And they don't bring everything over because, quite honestly, when folks do that inventory, they find between 25 to 50% of the content is either no longer relevant or no longer accurate. And so they bring it over. And if you think about the data maturity model, the basic level is it valid? Okay, great. And some teams, because of the urgency in which they implement data, they literally just bring it in. They don't type it, and they just get it in so that they can start moving. And then, if that's your structure and you do that, then over time you would look at and say, okay, well, maybe we should take advantage of the data types. Maybe we should take advantage of chunking our information at a lower level. And then the obvious piece is that your business should be changing over time. If your business is not growing and evolving and maturing, you're probably going out of business. because you're either going up or you're out in the business world. And so as your business requirements change, therefore the requirements on your content also change. And you need to, most folks I see, they do an initial implementation. If they take care with their initial data implementation, that architecture probably is good and sound for 2 years. After about 2 years, though, think about how your business has changed in 2 years. New products, different users. Maybe originally you didn't support chatbots. Maybe you do. Maybe there's a new delivery platform. How the architecture evolves to support this changing environment, needs to be part of your regular practice. It's not one and done.
Yeah. So how often should you be looking at it?
I think you should be doing at least a quarterly check-in with your product managers and your product owners to say, okay, here, what's happening with the focus for your products? Oh, what content changes or what information does the user need for their journey? And then to be able to understand what the requirements are, because some may or may impact the architecture, but others may not. But having that conversation, and it needs to be an ongoing conversation held at a regular interval so that it's not some big event. It should just be part of the product development.
All right, excellent. Apologize if you're seeing my image disappear. There might be something going on in the background. I'll blame Demi for that. Next question. What's the minimum you need for your information architecture to be valid?
Well, the word valid is, if we stick with only valid, then when you run your content through the Data Open Toolkit, or you validate it against the DTTs or schemas, you're valid. Does that mean that your structure meets your business requirements? No. And so this is where I think of valid as the bare minimum, because if it's not valid, it doesn't publish. But is that enough? And the answer is that if you're only going to generate static PDFs or platform independent units of content, you could probably get away with that. But let's be honest, most of the content we access is platform dependent. There's this dynamic delivery capability to it where it recognizes you based on permissions of, what you should have access to. What are you trying to do? And that means that there should be verification on top of validation. And in order to know what to check for, your architecture needs to be very clearly documented. And you need to be able to have some type of rules that you can, test and observe.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. And so we talk about a maturity model and as such. I mean, as you're going along, your information architecture, your model evolves, it becomes more and more mature. What are the different milestones that you should be looking out for that you should set for yourself to get this to?
So when you look at the data maturity model, you start in, it's valid, and you can legitimately have all of your content for a single deliverable in one massive composite topic. It would be valid. Would it meet your business needs for modular content? No. So that's level one. You're in, you can validate, you can publish. Level two is moving into maps, which means you're chunking your content into units, topics by type. I encourage folks that when they go to that next level to not stop at, is this a task or is this a concept or is this a reference? I would love for folks to take it to the next level and identify a more specific purpose for that information and apply a content type as well, because there are many different types of purposes that you could structure in a concept topic. And so, it would be valid. But is it going to, if you're going to go for more sophisticated, patterns, it doesn't give you a lot of insight. So I would encourage folks to do that, as well as, being understanding, there's map and then there's book map. There's probably a different purpose for different deliverable types. So let's say that, release notes versus a help system, you might want to actually identify the map purpose as well by a type. And then we're looking at reuse. Well, you can't reuse content that you can't find. And you can't, it's really hard to understand what's available to you and to reuse content without a fairly robust documentation effort on your architecture, understanding what the appropriate units are. Because the good news about DITA is it's an architecture, and the bad news is that it's an architecture, and that means that there's at least 5 different ways that you can reuse content in DITA, and that's the most frequently asked question. Is like, well, which mechanism should I use? And my answer is yes. Because you're probably going to reuse maps, you're going to probably reuse topics, you will probably content reference some things, you may key reference some other things, and in some situations you may use content key references. It's not only one mechanism, and so that's moving up the maturity level. And then as you're moving, for instance, into a CMS, that gives you more insight and management around things like lifecycle and metadata. And metadata is what powers your structured content. Then, you start off with some basic metadata. Well, I shouldn't say you. Most folks start off with some basic metadata. Maybe it's metadata they inherited if they have, mature content from index keywords, things like that. But now folks are really taking advantage of the newer technologies for managing taxonomies and getting more semantic architecture. And so that integration with your CCMS can truly change the power behind your content, but only if the content is well structured to begin with.
All right, excellent. And you mentioned taxonomy and metadata. What are taxonomy, ontology, metadata?
To me, metadata is, it's data. It's data about data. So it's the information about the thing. And the thing usually in our world is either the DITA map or the DITA topic. And then taxonomy is the classification. In layman's term, it's not just having a list of controlled values that you can select from. Those values are classified or organized into categories. So you think about instead of having just a flat list of 100 products, this is a product series. And then, that would be the most simple taxonomy. And then the ontology then layers in the relationships between the categories. And so, there's maturity models around all of this. And I highly encourage folks to go look at them. There's plenty of information out there. And what's funny is I ask folks, I say, do you have a taxonomy? And most of the time folks are like, well, we don't know. We don't think so. And I can guarantee that your organization not only has a taxonomy, you have multiple taxonomies. They just are probably sitting on some server that you don't know about. Marketing definitely has one. Whoever owns your websites or whatever the delivery architecture, they have one, because any filtering is handled by those values. So it's somewhere.
Yeah.
The biggest challenge is finding the person or persons who own the taxonomy and manage it, because where I'm seeing a lot of organizations having room for opportunity is in the governance and the synchronization and management of all these values, because everyone's hearing that it's useful and they're all wanting to do it, but they're not talking together. Again, it's people in multiple business units in large organizations. And as we know, that's the challenge. It always comes down to communication.
Yeah. And so what's the role of metadata in your IA then? You did hint at that.
Yeah, I mean, so let's say you do everything right. You chunk your information. You know that this unit is not only, let's say, a process topic or a concept topic. You know exactly the purpose for it, and it's the right amount, it's the right size, and so it's technically accurate, all the good things. If you do not provide a way for folks to access that information at the right time in their user journey, in the right way, in the right language, all that stuff, you might as well not have written it. Quite honestly, it's brutal to say it that way. But, and this is where, for instance, website analytics are fascinating to go and see how much of your information is never read and then try and figure out why. And usually it's because people do not know it's there and there's no easy way for them to get to it. How do you build that easy way to get to it? Metadata. And this is where you need to be working with the person who is doing the role of the delivery information architect for each of the platforms where your content is delivered, because each one of them will be slightly different, and you want to be able to make sure that you know what they need in terms of metadata values and that you are using the same values. What's interesting is that you can ask this question, oh, do you need a product value? Yes. Okay, great. You apply a product value. It doesn't display on the website. Why? Because you're not using the same values. So this is a very detailed discussion. It is not a, do you need a product value kind of question.
And it's all got to be documented and stored somewhere.
Yes. And this is, again, where that centralized taxonomy and that governance makes a huge difference, because, particularly for companies that have grown through acquisition, I can guarantee you that the word product does not mean the same thing in one company's taxonomy as it does in another. I mean, I remember when we were at IBM and we got the term component down from 19 definitions to 12, and we got down to 12 legitimately valid different definitions of the word component because of the way it was used in each of the different product lines. But that's why this is hard. People don't want to do it because it takes time. And, but if you don't, it's like you and I going into a conversation and us not agreeing on which language we're going to speak. We're talking, but we don't understand each other. And that's exactly what happens if your metadata isn't aligned.
All right, excellent. Thanks. So how would a CCMS help improve your metadata management?
Well, ideally, your CCMS would have the taxonomy values available for you to apply to the units rather than maybe in the units, because what we want to be able to do is, as the maturity of your taxonomy evolves, we want to be able to apply additional values without having to, for instance, check out a topic that impacts content lifecycle when the content hasn't changed. But we want to be able to leverage that connection through the CCMS, so the CCMS is aware and can help us say, oh, okay, when we're generating a package for this platform, use this subset of values. And by the way, can we validate them to make sure that all the values that are necessary will be there?
Oh yeah, that's an actually interesting use case there, like validating content before validating terms or metadata before you actually allow the check-in to occur.
Yeah, and the idea is, or one of the things you do, whether it's a pun check-in, or I like to do a metadata check prior to publishing, because it saves me a lot of time to be able to basically run a test to say, oh, okay, here's the recipe. Okay, and the recipe is your architecture. Here's the recipe for this deliverable type. Let's say that this deliverable type requires these 3 content types, only one instance of one of them, and that it can't have anything else in it because it's very specific. And then the metadata values by content type, or even what needs to be there. We can check that prior to publishing so that we have a chance to fix everything. Because, we want the publishing to go smoothly so that we generate the package we want. but I don't want to have to go and spend a ton of time testing that package on the platform. If I can do the metadata validation prior to the publish, we have a lot more confidence that the delivery is going to be what the user needs.
Yeah, yeah, and like you mentioned, like when you check out and that in regulated industries,
Oh gosh,
any
yeah.
change, must have a reason, and if that reason is, well, I'm adding metadata, well, it's not really that valid a reason, and the paperwork that's going to be generated after, it's just not worth it.
Yes, and that's where having the metadata applied to the object, not within the object, is very powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And then also checking it before you check in. If you have got a valid reason to change a subject, change a topic, sorry, then before it gets checked in, certain things are, verified. And if you've not completed them, you've not put down whatever values need to be inside of the file and not applied to it from the outside, then, you can't check it in until you fulfill those requirements.
And that's one of those things where, if you think about this ecosystem, this environment, it's like a clock. I don't know if people even know what insides of clocks look like anymore, right? But think of cogs and gears, where the content, each content unit is changing and being versioned, and then the organizational hierarchy and the map could be getting changed and versioned, and then the metadata values, the taxonomy is always evolving as well. So there's always going to be new values that maybe, deserve to be applied. So that needs to happen as well. So we have so many things that are moving, and understanding what needs to be applied and tracked when, particularly, like you said, in regulated industries, they really care about every word, every piece of punctuation. The metadata that's applied for discoverability on your website, that's you don't want to kick off a life cycle change for that.
Yeah, no. All right. Thank you very much. I think.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna turn it back to you, and then since we've talked about what we would like to have, how does Componize help us with this?
Okay, well, Componize is actually very, very good with metadata and taxonomy management. And what we say, or what the model is, that there are two types of metadata. There's embedded metadata, as we've mentioned. That's what's inside of your topics or inside of the data mapper and so on. And then there's also the CCMS metadata. That's when you're applying it to the objects and not within the objects, and we call them tags. So, well, Componize has the ability to extract and inject metadata. So when you're doing your migration, but also by command, you can say that, okay, well, we've updated our taxonomy now. We've chosen a few new terms, or we've changed definitions of a few new terms. Apply this to all the files within this particular branch or repository, particular folder. You can also pull metadata out of files, so if you need to, then after you've done, your migration, or you're now starting to officially have, an official taxonomy book or section, you can pull all of that out, extract it from the files, and then build, store it in a document where you can then speak with other members of the team, decide what does product mean, for example, and have the 5 different definitions. So if for example, pushing in, you've decided you've got your content, and you decide, well, the audience is going to change. Well, that's metadata that is stored within topics, and so you can push that to all the topics that have a particular audience or a publisher. Within the CCMS, the things that you might want to store on there will be things like the last modified date, the author, who modified a document. That doesn't need to be inside of an XML file. It's metadata that's applied on the outside. And then you could do both, so things like short titles, short descriptions, categories, keywords and things like that. You can do all of that by pushing it both inside of the XML file and in the CCMS and apply it to the particular objects. So the metadata then can be used in, like, we mentioned it, in search, for navigation, content templates, custom content rules. Publication pipelines is a particular one. So if you want to, publish all the service information for this particular audience, for this particular product, and this version of the particular product, all of that, that's where, that metadata content, and you fill it into, you put those parameters into your publication pipeline,
and so
in, and you get.
Sorry. Okay, and so for folks that might have a taxonomy management system, how can they integrate that with Componize so that they have consistent values?
Componize open API. Okay. It's open architecture, open API. So if you've got the APIs from whatever system that you're using, you work with your integration partners, plug it in, and then you're able to pull and push from whatever tool that you're using. That's one of the brilliant parts. One of the things I really like about the Componize CCMS. It handles all kinds of documents, but also, you can plug it into pretty much any tool that has, APIs available.
Yeah, because that's the real power. It's not that it's powerful to be able to control how you apply the values, but being able to pull the values from the central management of that taxonomy. So, because I said, that taxonomy is going to be evolving as well. You don't want to have to do any types of copies and pastes and all the other stuff. Being able to integrate directly to the source is so powerful there.
Yeah, and after working with, you go into a company as a consultant, you work with them, and you do all the work, on the taxonomy and all the classifications that you require and everything, and they've got it all stored somewhere, and then you tell someone, okay, well, now you've got to go into your CCMS and apply it one by one. Well,
that's never gonna happen.
You just connect both systems and just have it pull it in automatically. Apply it by rule, basically.
And this is, again, it's the marriage. So, one of the things that I strive for is understanding the recipe for a publication or a deliverable. And like I said, the more we know about each of the objects that goes in there, which is why I love having that additional type information by the content unit purpose, then we can create these, like I said, a recipe. And, we can test for structure, we can do all this stuff, but we can also then understand that if the deliverable is specific to a given product number, a product model, then, when it includes content that is shared with other product models, that only the appropriate metadata comes in. It's not that you're actually having to manage the metadata on the unit. You apply the appropriate metadata to that unit, and ideally you do that programmatically, then you can use the metadata at the higher level, at the map level, and with the publishing pipeline, so that the example I like to use is, you remember, shipping containers. 20 years ago, shipping containers were dumb. They were literally a metal box, and that's all they were. That is not what shipping containers are now. You can go up to a shipping container and you can tap into it. It knows what's in it, what's supposed to be in it. It knows where it's been. It knows who owns it. It knows who opened it last. These units are super smart now, and it doesn't matter whether they're on a train or they're on a ship or they're in a warehouse. That they come with all their information. And that's what I want people to do with their content. They've made these units. They're nice, they're structured, but they're just a box right now, unless they start powering it with metadata. And that's where we want you to start thinking about, how do I make this unit smarter when it goes to delivery?
All right. Excellent. Thank you very much. I think we've come up to the end. I'd love to continue chatting with you, but we've come to the end.
We'll do it again.
Yeah, we'll do another one. Yeah, definitely. And we've got loads to talk about. There's so much content on in information architecture, just basically structured content. You could talk about so many things in there. So I'm definitely going to hold you to that.
Okay.
We're going to talk again. All right. Thanks very much for being with us, and hope to speak with you soon.
All right. Thanks, Deepo.
All right. You take it easy.